All right, let's dive right into this fascinating explainer on how plants orchestrate incredibly complex growth and survival strategies without a single neuron. When we think of intelligence, we almost always picture a brain. But what if the natural world engineered a completely different way to process information, adapt to the environment, and literally build a body from the ground up?
This idea completely challenges our basic assumptions about intelligence. It introduces us to a system governed purely by cellular mechanics and chemical messengers. Think about it. Plants can't run away from danger, and they can't hunt for food. They are literally rooted in place. So, to survive, their bodies have to be the ultimate adaptable machines, capable of calculated decisions and even infinite growth.
To truly understand how they pull this off, we're going to break this explainer down into 6 chapters: mechanics of plant growth, tracking plant growth rates, specialization and plant plasticity, plant growth regulators, the growth promoters, and finally, the growth inhibitors.
Section 1. Mechanics of plant growth. First off, we need to define what growth actually is. Scientifically speaking, it's an irreversible, permanent increase in size or mass. This happens when anabolism, which is the building up of cellular materials, exceeds catabolism, the breaking down of them. And unlike humans, plants have indeterminate or unlimited growth. They can theoretically grow forever thanks to these specialized, rapidly dividing tissues called meristems located at their tips and roots. If you chop off a plant's branch, it just grows a new one. Try doing that with a human arm.
And the sheer magnitude of this cellular growth is absolutely staggering. To put it into perspective, a single cell in a watermelon fruit can increase its volume by an astonishing 350,000 times. That's not just dividing. That cell is physically swelling with water and cytoplasm to a massive degree.
Now, this growth happens in a highly structured sequence. It helps to think of these 3 growth phases kind of like a human life. First, you have the meristematic phase. You're born and rapidly divide. Second, the elongation phase. You physically enlarge, growing taller and taking on more volume. And finally, the maturation phase. You pick a specific career and mature into a specialized role. For a plant cell, that might mean thickening its walls to become a water-transporting xylem cell.
Moving on to Section 2, tracking plant growth rates.
So plants actually scale up mathematically in 2 distinct ways. In arithmetic growth, it's a steady, linear rate. One cell divides into 2, but only one of those new cells keeps dividing. The other gets a job and matures. It's a slow, steady addition. But then we have geometric growth. Now, this is an exponential rate where every single newly formed cell joins the division party. 1 becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8. It is a total biological explosion.
If we map that geometric growth out over time, it forms an S-shaped or sigmoid curve. We see a lag phase on day 1 where growth is slow as the plant kind of sets up. Then, boom, the log phase hits, an exponential growth explosion. But obviously, plants can't grow exponentially forever. Eventually, soil nutrients or physical space run out, and they hit the steady phase, where growth finally plateaus.
Section 3. Specialization and plant plasticity. Plants are incredibly flexible, honestly, way more than most animals. Through a process called differentiation, a cell takes on a permanent job. But, incredibly, a plant cell can hit the undo button. In a process called dedifferentiation, a mature cell can revert back to a dividing meristem state. And then, through redifferentiation, it can take on a brand new, completely different permanent job. Imagine retiring from accounting, turning back into a teenager, and then becoming an astronaut. That is essentially what plant cells can do. It's wild.
This environmental plasticity is just amazing. Take the buttercup plant, for example. It will literally change its physical anatomy based on where it lives. On land, it grows broad, flat leaves to catch the sun. But if that exact same plant grows underwater, it produces highly dissected, ribbon-like leaves. Why? So the harsh water currents can pass right through without tearing the leaf to shreds.
Section 4. Plant growth regulators.
Since they don't have a nervous system, plants rely entirely on these microscopic chemicals to make decisions. Here is our roster of the 5 main chemical groups, neatly divided into 2 camps: the growth promoters that hit the gas pedal and the growth inhibitors that hit the brakes.
Now, it's really easy to look at the word inhibitor and assume it's bad for the plant, but growth inhibitors are actually like protective parents keeping their kids out of traffic. Think about it. Stopping a fragile seed from germinating in the middle of a scorching drought is actually a brilliant protective survival tactic.
Section 5. The growth promoters.
What's amazing about these promoters is that almost all of them were discovered by total accident.
Let's start with auxins, famously studied by Charles Darwin himself. He noticed canary grass bending towards the light, a process called phototropism, and realized a chemical at the tip of the plant was controlling this. Auxins also promote apical dominance, making the plant grow tall rather than bushy. But amazingly, modern agriculture has created synthetic versions of auxins, like 2,4-D, which act as targeted weedicides. Farmers can spray their fields, and the synthetic auxins will cause broadleaf weeds to literally grow themselves to death, all while leaving the grassy crop perfectly safe.
Next up, we have gibberellins. This one was actually discovered in Japan because a strange fungal disease was causing rice crops to grow foolishly tall until they just toppled over. Scientists isolated the chemical from the fungus and found it's the ultimate stem lengthener. Today, it's used commercially everywhere. Farmers use it to stretch out the stems of sugarcane to boost sugar yields, and it's even sprayed on apples to elongate them into that perfect aesthetic shape consumers love to buy.
Our third promoter group is cytokinins. These were found accidentally during lab experiments trying to grow whole plants from isolated tobacco stems. Scientists realized that adding weird substances like coconut milk or, incredibly, DNA from herring sperm caused massive cellular division. Cytokinins drive cytokinesis, which is the actual splitting of cells. They also work in direct opposition to auxins, breaking that apical dominance to force the plant to grow outwards into a nice, bushy shape.
Section 6. The growth inhibitors.
Ethylene is super fascinating because it's actually a gas. It was discovered centuries ago when people realized that putting a batch of overripe shipped oranges next to green bananas caused the bananas to rapidly ripen. Ethylene is essentially the master switch for fruit ripening and eventual aging, which is known as senescence. It's the exact hormone that tells leaves when it's time to drop in the autumn.
Finally, we have abscisic acid, or ABA. This is the plant's emergency brake, and it directly ties back to that protective parent analogy we mentioned earlier. ABA is literally called the stress hormone. The exact second the environment becomes too hot, too dry, or too toxic to survive, ABA floods the plant system. It slams the stomata, which are the plant's breathing pores, completely shut to prevent water loss, and it pauses all seed growth until the environment is safe again.
Which leaves us with one final mind-bending thought to wrap up this explainer. We've seen plants calculate complex geometric math for growth, physically alter their leaf structures to survive water currents, and use a highly targeted pharmacy of chemicals to manage profound environmental stress. So given this incredible chemical and mechanical mastery, is the traditional brain actually overrated? I'll leave you to chew on that. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the brilliant, brainless world of plants.